Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 dropped in theaters last week, and so here's my ranking of all 7 Mission Impossible movies from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Nathan, and I talk about a bunch of movies on this channel. If you're new here, down below in the comment section, share your ranking of all 7 Mission Impossible movies over on my channel. I have more content like this. Check those out. Once this video is over, click that like button, be sure to subscribe because it really does help a lot. With that said, let's just get straight into the ranking. Easily in last place, Mission Impossible 2. This is by far easily the worst of all the Mission Impossible movies, and it's very easy to tell why. Simply put, there is no action in the movie until the last 30 minutes. Now, the last 30 minutes do have some pretty cool stunts and action, but other than that, the rest of the movie just does not work at all. It's just, instead of having urgency and action set pieces all throughout the film before the last 30 minutes, you get this love triangle story when Tom Cruise is hooking up with women, and then they're trying to spy on this other dude who's the threat in this movie. And it's just this like sort of love triangle that you just don't really care about all that much. And I just don't understand why they thought this would be a good story to tell within the rest of the Mission Impossible movies. Therefore, because there's not much action, unlike the rest of the Mission Impossible movies, that makes it maybe the most boring film in this franchise. Beyond that, it's totally forgettable. Even the action in the last 30 minutes, you remember the motorcycle stuff, but not much besides that. And it simply doesn't fit with the rest of the franchise very well. And so, this is a film that, I don't know, it just doesn't really work all that much for me. And so, this is easily the worst of the franchise. Number 6, Mission Impossible. To be clear, there's a pretty big jump from Mission Impossible 2 to Mission Impossible because I think Mission Impossible is a very cool film that leans a lot more into the spy elements than the rest of the franchise, and therefore it stands out from the other films this franchise that has. Most of the other films have these big action set pieces, and they're thrilling and exciting in their own way. This film is thrilling and exciting because it has the spy set pieces. Instead of relying on big gigantic explosions and action sequences, though there are some of those, it just leans more into a bunch of spy elements that make like the James Bond films work and stuff like that. It just makes for a distinct film in its own franchise. It's while still maintaining all the thrills, the chills, and the edge of your seat tension you want from a Mission Impossible film. Now, why is this one not higher up on the list? Because like the final reveal at the end, pretty mixed on that. I don't know if it fully works for me about who the real villain of this film actually is when they reveal that at the end. And I don't know about it. I'm not really sure why it doesn't really work out that well. But it is just a cool, old-fashioned spy film that kicked off a great franchise. In 5th place, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, and to be clear, I give this movie an A-. A lot of these movies are great. That just tells you how good of a franchise you have when Mission Impossible franchise goes from A- and up, and this one's only at number 5. And so, when it comes to Rogue Nation, it just does a lot of things that make it really, really great. Christopher McQuarrie, of course, directed it, and you can see where he's going with it as he directed the next 2 films in the franchise. And so, things like Rebecca Ferguson as Ilsa. Ilsa is just a great addition to the franchise, who's a mysterious kind of character that you want to learn more about. There's also a bunch of exciting action, of course, from beginning to end, like all these other films, like the plane sequence right there, when he's hanging off an airplane. That happens just at the opening sequence of this film, and it's just phenomenal. But beyond that, the story itself has this world-building aspect to it, where, like, it feels bigger than the previous 4 films, and it just makes the Mission Impossible world a place you want to explore. Something that the first 4 films didn't really do, and Christopher McQuarrie just gets insane with it. This is where the franchise started to peak when Christopher McQuarrie stepped in as director. I will say the reason it's lower on the list is because I don't find it to be as memorable as the ones higher on this list. It doesn't have that memorable thing besides the plane sequence. But in general, this is where the franchise really started to rise up to me, to solidify this franchise as a great one. And so I just really enjoy what Christopher McQuarrie is doing with these films. Number 4, Mission Impossible 3, and this is probably the most straightforward film of the entire franchise, but I think in that regard, it really works. It's, of course, the most fast-paced and fun of the Mission Impossible films to me because it was directed by J.J. Abrams, and he just is able to make all this fast-paced movies. Like Star Wars The Force Awakens is one of them. Even Rise of Skywalker is entertaining to me because it's fast-paced, and this movie, in his directorial debut, he just does really well doing with it. But beyond that, I think this movie, unlike the previous 2 films in the franchise, actually builds tension better. Where you have a more personal motivation for Ethan Hunt. That's what I thought really worked about Dead Reckoning. And because the stakes are more personal, you feel the urgency, the stakes, the danger. And I just thought that aspect of it really worked. The villain here, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, I think he's just a great villain inside of this film. And so this is just a film that I have a lot of fun with when I watch it. And I think that it's a very nice addition to the franchise simply because it is more straightforward. So I just really enjoyed this movie. 3rd place, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. And this is just a fantastic addition to the franchise. Of course, Brad Bird directed it, and he just adds some of this more fun of the franchise simply because you actually get to see the team. What I mean by that is that in the first 3 films, there was a team, but I felt like it was only really Ethan Hunt doing most of this stuff while the team was mostly just behind the computers and stuff like that, up in the vents and stuff like that. And here you actually get to see them in the action, a lot more prominent, and I thought that aspect of it actually works. Also, there's just some of the most memorable sequences in the entire franchise, like that Dubai sequence right there. That is a great sequence, and when he's climbing the Burj Khalifa, he did it in real life. There's a YouTube video showing how they did it, and it's just some of these memorable, iconic sequences of this franchise. Also, some really nice new additions. I really like characters like Jeremy Renner in this movie as well as Rogue Nation. And so, because I thought that this was just a very nice addition, perfected by Brad Bird, and one of the more memorable Mission Impossible movies to me. Our runner-up, Mission Impossible Fallout. This is a film that I think is when the franchise really started to pop and stand out with this film as well as Dead Reckoning. It's a lot more intense than the previous 5 films in the franchise, because this is probably the one of those films that you probably feel the most danger, urgency happening. It's the most edge of your seat of all the Mission Impossible films. Add to that, Henry Cavill is such a great villain as John Lark in this movie. He's just brings this performance that's different from what he does as Superman, but he's like a charismatic evil agent kind of, and it just really pops out because stuff like that. There's also could just get some really cool action sequences. In the final battle, you got this helicopter fight right here, where they're shooting miniguns at each other, and then of course it ends with that very tense scene where they have to cut the wires of the bombs, and it's just very cool. Of course, you get the opening sequence, not the opening sequence, but near the opening when they're falling out of a plane. And so, in general, just a great addition to the franchise that solidified Christopher McQuarrie as just a director that can do a bunch of great things with this franchise. But easily coming in first place, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. To me, this is just currently the best film in the entire franchise, and it was shocking to me once I left the theater on how good this movie actually is. Right off the bat, it has the most memorable storyline of all the franchises, where you get this plotline about AI, and it ties into Ethan's past somehow with this new guy, and it's just huge in scale with massive stakes. Of all the films, I think this is the one that's the largest in scale, and of course, you always get these memorable action stunts, like the one where he's jumping off a cliff on a motorcycle, and every single character stands out in their own way. Whether you're talking about returning characters like the team, Luther, Ethan, or new characters like Haley Atwell, Grace, who just stands out. She just has a nice dynamic with the characters, Tom Cruise in particular. And when you know that a bunch of this movie, or all of this movie really, was practical effects, it becomes that much more immersive. And it was shocking how good this movie actually was. I could not believe that I liked it as much as I actually did. And it's solidified that Tom Cruise is outdoing himself with these Mission Impossible movies. You feel the urgency, the danger. There's massive stakes. But you also care about the characters, leading to some of the most emotional moments in the entire franchise that the previous 6 films just didn't have. For a 2 hour and 40 minute film, it's surprisingly nicely paced. It did not feel like it was nearly 3 hours. And although it has a cliffhanger, it doesn't feel like it just cuts off like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse or Fast X. This is a film that came to a satisfying conclusion, albeit being a part 1. To me, this is the best of Mission Impossible, the best of what these movies could be, maybe even the best action movie. And so this is easily my favorite of the Mission Impossible movies. There you have it, that's my list. Down below in the comment section, share your ranking of all 7 Mission Impossible movies over on my channel. I have more content like this. Check those out right now. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end, and I will see you in the next one.